Paying bills is a man's job. A man's job. A man's job. A man's job. Paying bills is a man's job. Paying bills is a man's job. Paying bills is a man's job.
We raise our daughters and love our sons. No, what y'all are actually doing is hyper-fixating on teaching your daughters how to navigate a world full of the sons you all have emotionally neglected. Okay, no, but can we talk about it? Adolescence.
With the recent release of Netflix's Adolescence, we're hearing a familiar outcry from many parties as to how do we deal with toxic masculinity? What do we do for boys to make sure that they don't grow up into quote-unquote toxic males? But what I find interesting is that anytime this conversation comes up, the conversation that's never addressed is the simple one. No matter how we deal with the emotional maturity of young boys, what we're expecting of them in terms of dealing with their quote-unquote toxic masculinity, boys are expected to grow up into human doings. People who provide resources to young ladies for dating access, mating access, families, etc. And that is never going to change.
For example, if I were to get married to a man, but if I was to... Unfortunately, I still find men attractive, but we'll see how long that's going to last. But if I were to get married to a man, I would only be marrying a man who is putting land, properties, and assets in my name. Oh, sorry, what's funny? You know what, that's interesting that we're laughing about that, because it sounds ridiculous, right? The idea that a woman would want security when we know that men are unreliable. Not only are they unreliable, they are a woman's apex predator. That's right.
If you're a young man and you're confronted with social media, of course you're going to see some media posts from RP creators telling you things about how guys can be more masculine. But you're also going to be confronted with media like this, of young ladies essentially telling you, your value to me is based on a dollar value, point blank, period. Go get the money, and it's your job, if you want to be in front of my face, to come up with money. But also you have to be a nice person doing it because inherently you're a bad person.
That's right. The man you're laying with could kill you. And so when we are encouraging women to get married, we are encouraging women to step 1 inch closer to our death. Unless we are encouraging the women we are emboldening to get married to enter this decision with their best interest at heart. Yes, it is controversial to talk about money and assets and land and properties when discussing marriage, because we're taught to follow the distraction of love, romantic love. What about love? Well, this is all about love. The man who loves me will make sure that I am secure for the rest of my life. But unfortunately, most marriages are not structured or approached in that way. Women are taught to approach marriage from a place of leading with emotion. Again, that's to distract us. Because if we put our emotions aside and focus on the logic and the rationale and the reality of how will this benefit me, most women will not marry men. We will be in commune with each other and leave the men to fend for themselves.
If you're a young boy and you're consuming media like this, how do you process what love is when you're essentially being told you got to do what you got to do to get the money, but also you need to be someone that's amenable to the whims of what the latest young lady you're dating wants? And we know that's difficult.
The two most difficult things in life are hitting the baseball and keeping a woman happy long term.
Okay, no, but can we talk about it? Adolescence. Great mini series on Netflix. Go watch it. One thing that I appreciated they highlighted was the severe consequences of emotionally neglecting your sons. I teach middle schoolers. Do you know how many of these middle school boys, when they go home, from the moment they get home on, are locked away in their room playing any kind of video game, watching any kind of anything on social media, no parental surveillance whatsoever? Meanwhile, your daughters, you want to know what they watching, what they're doing, who they're talking to, how long they talking to them. You want to know everything about your daughters, but you know nothing about your sons.
Via the BBC, March 15, 2025, boys growing up without dads are in crisis report says, Harvey Watson was on a path to what he calls a gangster life. The 17-year-old from Clacton in Essex was a lost and troubled kid, having grown up without a dad. I was behaving very poorly in school, and if I had carried on, I would have almost certainly have been excluded. His experience is echoed in a new report, which says that young boys who lack positive male role models are in crisis. Fatherlessness has a significant impact on boys' mental health, education, and future prospects. This young lady is a middle school educator, and one of the questions I would like to ask her if I had the chance to meet her is, what is your definition of healthy masculinity in a young boy? Is it the ability to sit still for long periods of time? Is it the ability to regulate strong emotion and display it in a way that's more like a young girl would do instead of how young boys do, which is more boisterous? And the last question, and maybe the most important one I would ask her is, do you think it's possible for a woman to train a boy in how to be a man?
You want to know everything about your daughters, but you know nothing about your sons. That is emotional neglect, and I'm going to use the A word. It's abusive. Y'all, how come all these boys are watching incel red pill content? Because there's no men talking to them when they go home. Their dads aren't sitting them down and picking their brain and talking to them about life. Their dads are on their phone watching porn. Too busy in their own phones watching porn, talking to other women, to be worried about their actual son's well-being.
When I watch the way that she expresses her, I would dare say, her presumptions as to how men behave at home, I would wonder how fair she's looking at the masculinity of the young boys in her classroom. If she thinks that that's what the fathers are doing, if the fathers are even there at all, then maybe those boys are having a very difficult time expressing any kind of positive masculinity in that classroom. And that is, of course, not casting any aspersions on her per se, but it might just be her training. If you're a young boy in her class and her assumption is your father's at home all day on a cell phone, or he's not taking an interest in your growth, then you don't have as much a chance at success in that classroom as a young girl would, sad to say. However, a deeper look into the BBC article reveals what many of us know is the real culprit. What does the Lost Boys report say? By the age of 14, almost half of firstborn children do not live with both natural parents, compared to 21% for those born in 1970. Boys are now more likely to own a smartphone than to live with their dads in the United Kingdom. Boys struggling in education are more likely to take their own lives, less likely to get into stable work, and far more likely to be caught up in crime. As the likelihood of a masculine presence in the home diminishes, young men are seeking new modes of masculinity. Lawrence Delagio, the former England rugby union captain, backed the report, stating, "We have been so careless in our downgrading of the traditional masculine virtues that we are in danger of leaving a whole generation behind."
Y'all, how come all these boys are watching incel red pill content? Because there's no men talking to them when they go home. Their dads aren't sitting them down and picking their brain and talking to them about life. Their dads are on their phone watching porn. Too busy in their own phones watching porn, talking to other women, to be worried about their actual son's well-being. These boys are turning to incel red pill content because they look up to those men, because the men in their lives are doing them a disservice. And while, yes, emotional neglect is both parents' responsibility, there is more when it comes to the father's role and being a good role model for his son. And y'all are emotionally neglecting and abusing these boys by not being as hands-on with them as you are your daughters. Period, point blank. And it's time we talk about it.
The thing about masculinity is that it can't be put in a box. It's not a monolith. Some would see this young boy and say, oh, what he's doing is very feminine. But my retort would be Michael Jackson and Prince. There are stories of Michael Jackson threatening to beat up Tupac because he was using the B word. And you certainly wouldn't leave your young girlfriend around Prince, now would you? That said, however, what's more important than how it's expressed is there a masculine man somewhere in that boy's life that's going to reinforce how he defines himself instead of the world defining masculinity for him?
Caleb, when you fell off that bike, what's your mama say?
My baby got hurt.
And how you fall? Hey, what your mama say?
Oh, my baby got hurt.
Even at his young age, and you can see the boy still has a shiny knot on his head, he understands the difference in the parenting style of his mother versus his father. If his mother were his sole parent, he would solely identify in the emotionality of falling off his bike and how he felt about it. But identifying with his father, what he realizes that, I had a hiccup, I bounced my head on the concrete or the grass, it hurt a little bit, dusted off, I got to keep moving because that's what my dad would do. And the reason why dad is preparing him for that is because all of this hoopla about this Adolescence movie, a week, 2 weeks, 10 weeks from now, people are still going to look at this young boy and say, in the future, you need to grow up and be a provider, and I don't care about your feelings. And the father knows that. And all of this talk that's happening around men identifying with your young boys' feelings and how Adolescence is a show of how young boys need to be more in touch with their feminine side is in a way bunk. Because at the end of the day, society, and more specifically women, are going to expect these young boys to put their emotions aside and produce. So if that's what the end goal is in the first place, just cut through the crap, if you will, and be honest. You want guys to act a certain way and still provide the resources. You want the traditional part of manhood, but the parts of manhood that you don't like about traditional masculinity, you want guys to tuck that down and be more amenable to what young ladies want. The truth is, we can't really put our finger on what young ladies want outside of men being producers, which is what this is all about in the first place now, isn't it? Producers that are easier to be around, that do what you want. Because if it's something else, I'm waiting to hear what you really want, because I don't think it's anything other than that. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, comment below. I'll catch you next video. Take care, guys.